Clutch failure was imminent on the Marina coupe. It had been showing signs for a while. Being totally honest, I was reasonably pleased to have an excuse to move it on its way. It wasn't that I didn't like driving it, or a case of unreliability. On that score, there was no fault to be found, really. Just other people didn't get the joke. Very few can actually laugh at themselves, taking their image and so-called social standing as serious as a broken leg. I have never been one of them. Decades of poor health and living with disability made me just happy to be having a good day. I thought it was hilarious, driving round in a car the colour of cat shit, the model epitomising everything that was wrong with British car building in the 1970s, whilst wearing a cowboy hat and having a ponytail. I guess rather than seeing the irony and humour of a country boy four-wheeler dealer, folk made the mistake of using themselves as yardsticks as to if I was being serious or not. Anyway, the point had become where people genuinely wouldn't deign to speak to me, all because of that bloody car. I decided a radical flip-flop was again needed. Big Pete had a BMW 528i E28 for sale on the garage forecourt. It was a lovely dolphin grey colour, looked really smart, electric everything, alloys, and it went exceptionally well. If it had not got I had not got trade insurance, then there would have been no way I could have got it covered at just 20. Being a trade-in, there were issues, mainly an oil in the coolant problem. This resulting in a chocolate mousse type substance turning up in the radiator, etc. every few weeks. Eventually, the oil began reacting in the rubber hoses, and they themselves started to disintegrate one by one. I didn't care. Bombing around in this thing was great fun. Everyone and their dog felt a need to comment, the car being such a contrast to the previous poor old Morris. This did include sundry coppers too, though. Suddenly, in social circles, I had gone from zero to hero. Vacuous females now wanting lifts back home after the pub's closed, or waving at me in the high street. I knew it was just the car, but if they were that bloody stupid, who was I to not jump on board? Also, the car had a tow bar fitted. I could once again employ my uncle's box trailer in order to collect various small amounts of junk, rather than taking a Bedford lorry out just for two broken washing machines and a cast iron bath, etc. Being still pretty young, I got into stupid races with mouthy pillocks in hot hatches in the early hours of the morning, their stereos blaring and the windows open as we were flying through the night on deserted rural roads. Eventually the head gasket cried enough and I flogged the car off in the Auto Trader small ads. A BMW of that model now would cost you thousands, but it was brilliant back then while it lasted. Export was something I was starting to get involved with. Lorries, small commercials, plant equipment, and even a few cars. Despite being in pretty much scrap condition, had much greater value going abroad, Nigeria being a most likely destination for a lot of the kit. I had a contact called Bob, who when he wasn't in the huge dog pen at the rear of his council terrace, he bred greyhounds, was putting together consignments for an exporter up in Wolverhampton. I would ring him once I had a few vehicles lined up, and he would show up to collect them. It was a standing joke, because I always said the same thing when I rang up. "Hello, missus. Bob about?" I would say. Totally missing the Bob about gag. His wife would always reply, "Nah, he's in the dog pen. Want me to get him?" I always felt like saying, "No, fuck it." Didn't feel like selling him anything. Just wanted to know if he was in the dog pen or not, like. They divorced a few years later. Maybe it was after her Mensa membership expired. Safe in the knowledge I could place certain vehicles, my confidence to buy more quantity and heavier duty items grew. One local farm dispersal auction I went to, hardly anyone out of the usual faces had bothered to turn up. No real competition, just other farmers. With two lorries in the auction that would go up to Bob, plenty of scrap cars, a van, and all sorts of farm machinery in a dreadful hedgerow condition, I just kept bidding on lot after lot. By the time the sale was over, I had bought about 3 dozen items. Standing in the queue, just about to pay, I was beckoned over by the auctioneer to discuss the location of some keys to one of the lorries. When I got back in line, the bloke and woman sat at the desk kept ignoring me, seeing to those who had been behind me first. After a couple of more times, I spoke up. "Can you please explain why you're not serving me?" I asked. "What do you want, son? You have to wait in the queue to be served. Has your dad bought something?" the patronising bastard behind the desk came up with. "No." I explained my father had not purchased anything, that in fact I had been in the queue for quite a while before being called to briefly out by his boss to clarify something. I then withdrew a wad of notes akin to a small bog roll from my inner pocket and dropped them in front of him to pay up. This would have to wait for him and his female counterpart to close their gawping mouths and crack on. It took 2 days back and forth to shift all my purchases. the largest of which was a bright yellow Ford Cargo 16-ton box lorry, with the Sandu Bakery Ales Owen blazoned up the side of it, and a smaller Bedford TK lift and tow recovery truck. Bob sent a lorry to pick up the Bedford, but the Ford could not be collected by his man for another few days. With the auctioneers on my back to clear it from the site, Dad and I went down there with a spare tractor battery and a can of diesel. More out of hope than anything else. Despite having been sat by the side of a barn for years, once the fuel bled through, the ridiculously large box lorry fired up in a cloud of smoke. The body on it was about 30 foot long, which left us with a puzzle as to how we would extract it from the current home it was in. Most of the tyres took air, but one inside rear was knackered. The brakes were of course stuck on, as was the clutch. Manually winding the brakes off, then some swift sledgehammer applications got the sat solved. To try and free the clutch, I put the lorry in second gear pedal hard to the floor and kept jerking it on the starter motor. With a loud bang, the rusted plate came away. Now came a lot of shunting and sweating as I tried to free this lorry-sized cork from its bottle. Tried not to take either of the barns with me. With the lorry ticking over, the brakes were lightly adjusted so as to vaguely work. And it was the moment of truth. Would she get back up the yard? I went first. The roads were quiet. Everyone was probably at church, it being Sunday morning. Dad followed in his Mark II Astra van with strict instructions to drive erratically if a copper came up behind him, in order to deflect attention from me. This lorry had not seen the road in a decade, was far too big for the driving licence I held, and had one shredded rear tyre. Amazingly, it didn't feel a bad old truck to drive. Having not ran for years, she smoked like a train under load in the low gears as we crawled up over the motorway bridge and along the quiet B roads. Red diesel that we added to the ancient stuff that was lurking in there probably didn't help this. Aside from developing an air leak, we got home without drama, though it raised a few eyebrows from my neighbours due to the size of the thing being shunted into our yard. Bob sent a bloke with a large underlift recovery truck to fetch it later in the week. Said fella came over to the bungalow in order to sort the paperwork. He requested to use our lavatory. After his journey from Wolverhampton, in our outside bog we stored a crate we kept potatoes in. It was under the sink, about 3 feet from the toilet itself. But after he had gone, my mother went in to get some to peel and started shrieking. That bloody lorry driver's pissed in our box of spuds. Sure enough, there was a trail from the porcelain into the box. He had even failed to flush. Mother had me in there evicting everything and mopping down with disinfectant for the next hour. Guess the bloke had trouble with his control and aim. Hello there. Thank you for watching my video. If you enjoyed this and would like to see more, please give us a subscribe and also like. It is appreciated. It does mean a lot. Cheers.